It's been 80 years since World War II ended in Europe, and Taiwan's president is marking the anniversary for the first time. But why now?
I think the broader context here is really about China and Ukraine.
That's as Germany and Israel's offices in Taiwan rebukes the leader of the KMT for comparing the president to Hitler.
今天赖清德，你对在野党的所作所为，你要记住，你就是在做希特勒做的事情。
Taiwan semiconductor companies wait nervously for the announcement of U.S. tariffs that could force them to change how they operate.
在台湾很好的发展，有很好的安定，有很好的根基，但是我们却不得不向外走。
Plus, villages in northern Vietnam are still struggling to recover from the damage left by Super Typhoon Yagi 6 months ago. Good evening. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Joyce Tseng. President Lai Ching-te has used his VE Day speech to warn of the threat of authoritarianism facing Taiwan and democracies across Europe. It's the first time Taiwan has held an event to commemorate VE Day when Allied powers declared victory over Nazi Germany, ending World War II in Europe. Rick Lauert has more from Taipei.
Here in the center of Taipei, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te is gathering foreign dignitaries and diplomats to commemorate for the first time here in Taiwan the end of World War II in Europe. Why? Well, Lai has an important message that authoritarian aggression is alive and well, and it's being felt keenly here in Taiwan as China continues to put military pressure on Taiwan to push it to accept its claims of sovereignty over the country.
台湾与欧洲 正共同面对新集权集团的威胁，我们正共同经历攸关通讯与网络安全，铺设数十年的海底电缆会遭到刻意的破坏。我们正共同经历攸关民主健全发展的选举会受到各种境外错假资讯的干扰，在我们的社会 制造刻意的对立。
This comes as Chinese President Xi Jinping joins Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Moscow to mark the same occasion. Lai here aligning himself with like-minded democracies and the rules-based international order established after World War II, and calling on them to unite in the face of rising 21st century authoritarian aggression. Alex Chen and Rick Lauert in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
To hear more about Taiwan marking VE Day for the first time and what to make of President Lai's speech, Rick Lauert spoke to political scientist Wen-Ti Tseng from the Atlantic Council's Global China Hub.
Why do you think President Lai Ching-te chose to mark VE Day this year, and what was he trying to convey with the event and with his speech?
I think the broader context here is really about China and Ukraine. And at the moment when Lai began his speech about VE Day to commemorate World War II in Europe, is also the precise moment when Chinese President Xi Jinping was visiting Russia as well. And so this goes to the continuing emphasis that Lai makes, including this speech, about the importance of Taiwan continuing to stand with fellow democracies. And indeed, that sentiment about continued partnership with like-minded democracies is particularly valuable at the time when they may be concerned about geopolitical uncertainty, as well as perhaps global democratic recession, or at least a risk of it.
What sort of relationship does Taiwan have with World War II?
Well, during World War II, Taiwan was a colony of Japan, which by extension meant that Taiwan fought alongside Japan. And so in that particular sense, I think Taiwan, by talking about the history of Taiwan in relation to World War II, you can argue that Taiwan is a story that shows how states evolve and that they learn from experience. So rather than framing World War II as necessarily a battle between good guys and bad guys, oftentimes more about framing the possibility of struggle between the good forces and less than good forces of our nature, and how Taiwan itself has gone through that path of evolving from authoritarianism into a liberal democracy. And that shows how other states may also consider following suit as well. It's in that particular sense that actually you see Taiwan's President Lai talk about in his speech that formerly Axis countries during World War II have by now all become 100% democratic states and enjoy lasting peace and prosperity.
It's obviously a very difficult time geopolitically. How is Lai trying to position Taiwan?
I think what it shows is that Taiwan still values the logic of value-based diplomacy, and that is democratic values, shared commitment to liberal democracy remain cornerstones of Taiwan's international outreach. And that is why on the important day of World War II's anniversary for Europe Theater, it invites both the representative to Taiwan from the UK as well as from the European Union and many others to show up at this particular speech and to give them the floor as well. Again, to show how Taiwan, with its many Western and European friends and partners, they're willing to share the same floor and speak with one voice.
That was political scientist Wen-Ti Tseng. Main opposition Kuomintang Chair Eric Chu is facing backlash for a controversial statement he made on the eve of VE Day, drawing a comparison between President Lai and Hitler. Leslie Liao has more.
Strong words for an adversary.
真正需要下台的是赖清德，真正需要悔悟的是赖清德，真正需要改变的是独裁者赖清德。
Taiwan's main opposition Kuomintang Chair Eric Chu has pulled no punches in describing how he feels about President Lai Ching-te, but his most recent comments may have gone too far.
今天赖清德，你对在野党的所作所为，你要记住，你就是在做希特勒做的事情。
Chu compared Lai to Germany's authoritarian Nazi leader on the eve of the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day, which commemorates the Allies' win in Europe during World War II. This all begs the question, where does Chu's ire for Lai come from? Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party and the KMT are fighting for control in the legislature. While the KMT currently holds majority power in the chamber in conjunction with the Taiwan People's Party, its lawmakers are facing recall campaigns. The KMT is running a counteroffensive looking to unseat ruling party lawmakers also. But in recent weeks, there have been reports that signatures on petitions supporting the KMT's recall drive include the names of dead people. Prosecutors have searched several KMT offices and detained party officials. Chu says that the moves are calculated efforts to take down Taiwan's opposition.
赖总统的态度已经很清楚啊，他希望每一个选区只要罢蓝的都要过关。所谓的鹰犬们就全力的照他的态度来对在野党不断的追杀。
Chu's comparison of Lai to Hitler drew an immediate backlash. The German Institute Taipei responded through a post on social media. In it, the office says, "We must state unequivocally, Taiwan today is in no way comparable to the tyranny of National Socialism. The institutions in Taiwan cannot and must not be likened to the instruments of terror employed by the Nazi regime." The Israel Economic and Cultural Office in Taipei also published a social media statement echoing the German office's sentiments. It said it was disappointed and concerned, and that Chu's comparisons are inappropriate. Chu has since doubled down on his comments.
国际社会，大家应该共同唾弃的是独裁者，而不是要帮有可能伤害民主、迫害反对党的独裁者讲话，更不应该干预各国的内政。
This is not the first time the KMT is in hot water for comparing the ruling party to the Nazis. Just last month, prosecutors summoned a pro-KMT recall campaigner for questioning. He showed up wearing a swastika armband and brandishing a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf. Chu initially defended the person's actions, saying it was meant to ridicule what he called the DPP's dictatorship. Chu's comments against Lai come at a sensitive time, a time when much of the world is celebrating victory over authoritarianism. As the world remembers, the KMT has found itself at the center of a self-inflicted controversy. James Lin and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Several officials from the opposition Kuomintang's Tainan branch have been indicted for allegedly forging signatures on petitions to recall lawmakers from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, marking the first indictments linked to recall campaigns. Tainan prosecutors say 11 people, 9 of whom are KMT officials, were indicted for faking signatures and illegally using party member information to meet the required 3,000 petition signatures within a short 10-day deadline. Authorities are looking into possible broader KMT involvement in the case. This is the latest in a widening investigation into alleged fraud that has seen several local KMT offices raided. Several people involved in recall campaigns against KMT lawmakers have also been questioned. Chipmakers are bracing as Washington considers tariffs of up to 100% on their products. Officials expect what they call a good result for Taiwan, but the outcome is still uncertain. John Ventriest reports.
For Taiwan's semiconductor factories, a bump in the road could come any day now, maybe even any hour. The Trump administration says it could put tariffs of 25% to 100% on imported semiconductors. When the Trump administration put up its tariff plan for public comment, there were just 10 responses about chips, far fewer, for example, than the roughly 300 that came in about lumber tariffs. Some observers think Trump's administration will take this as a green light for chip tariffs to move ahead. And it could get worse for Taiwan if Trump takes on a request from Seoul to exempt South Korean chips from levies. Details of a final decision may come from Washington this week, though when is hard to say. On top of this, the U.S. Department of Commerce plans to study the feasibility of ramping up domestic chip production to meet American needs. The whole situation could prove tough for a Taiwanese industry that relies on exports.
我们是业界，我们是跟着我们的客户走，布局上为了未来的一个很重要的一个立足啊，在台湾有很好的发展，有很好的 R&D， 有很好的根基了，但是我们却不得不向海外走。
Taiwan's government, though, seems optimistic.
我相信因为我们台湾的这个科技跟美国是互补的，所以这特别是在晶片这个领域是这个样，所以我相信我们能够这个谈出一个对台湾比较好的一个结果。
But for now, everything is up in the air for an industry that just prior to Trump's election had predicted production value would grow 16.5% in 2025, breaking $192 billion US dollars.
因为现在的环境是非常动态在发展，那我们也是动态在这个模拟。
Taiwan's chip makers may soon need to reevaluate this year's prospects and work out strategies to mitigate the impact of whatever tariffs the U.S. decides on. Andy Xue and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Shares of Google's parent company, Alphabet, slid more than 7% after Apple said it may stop using Google as the default search engine for its products, adding options for AI search instead. Apple said it was looking at AI search options from companies like OpenAI, Perplexity, and Anthropic. AI search provides summaries of results rather than a list of links. Google is developing its own version of AI search. The search engine giant is in the midst of an antitrust suit over its use of exclusive deals with companies like Apple and Samsung. Court documents revealed that Google pays Apple about $20 billion US dollars a year to be its default search engine. Taiwan's Foreign Minister Lin Jialong has started his U.S. visit by meeting with the mayor of Houston, Texas, where he proposed building a so-called Taiwan Tower to boost bilateral investment. Lin says the project aims to provide one-stop services for both Taiwanese and American companies, deepening Taiwan-U.S. relations, particularly in economic and technology sectors. The building might also be used to house Taiwan's representative office in Houston. Lin says the plan is part of President Lai Ching-te's roadmap for deeper trade ties with the U.S. Local officials are praising the plan. The majority of people in Taiwan think spending more on defense is a good thing. That's according to a new survey from the Institute of National Defense and Security Research. The poll shows that there is growing support in Taiwan for a stronger military. For more on this, Jaime Ocon spoke to David Sachs, a security analyst with the Council on Foreign Relations based in New York.
This poll from the INDSR shows that 51% of people in Taiwan want to spend more on defense. Is that significant? And if so, what's the motivating factor behind that?
I think that it's great news that a majority of Taiwanese people want to spend more on defense. I think that part of it, or I should say that I think that the bulk of the reason for that is because of the Chinese gray zone coercion and the aggression that China is showing towards Taiwan. And I think that part of it is also that Taiwanese people see that there is pressure from the United States to spend more on defense. President Trump was asked about this before the election, and he said that Taiwan should spend 10% of GDP on defense. Bridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, echoed that number during his confirmation hearing. I don't think that 10% of GDP is a realistic target for Taiwan. And we could spend, too much time arguing whether the right number for Taiwan is 3%, 4%, 5%, or something even higher. But I think that the general thrust of that resonates with Taiwanese people, which is that 2.5% of GDP is not seen as sufficient.
In this poll, a good number of people also support the idea of creating special budgets for the military to boost its defense. Can you explain how that would work?
So I think that the special budget was traditionally a way of addressing that uncertainty by MND. It didn't necessarily know how to budget for these items. I think more recently, though, what we've seen with the Lai administration is that the special budget might be a creative way to get around a deadlock in the legislature. So if the opposition party wants to obviously hold up the government budget and hold up defense spending and raise questions, it's easier to put a special budget forward in many ways than through the regular process. I think that if we're talking about this poll more narrowly and support for special budget in the poll, I think that makes sense on a very basic, practical level. People don't want higher taxes, and people don't want to contemplate trade-offs. So if you ask somebody, do you want to raise defense funding, but you're going to have slightly worse healthcare or less investment in education or pensions, people don't want that.
One part of the report also shows that about 30% of the people also have no confidence in the military. Do you think that's because of the espionage cases that we're seeing being uncovered by the military?
I'm not generally a very optimistic guy. I'm usually a pessimist. But when I see these espionage cases being uncovered and I see the rings being put out there in the public, I actually have more confidence now. Because if you're saying that there is no espionage in Taiwan's military, then I think you're just not looking hard enough. You're not taking it seriously. But to me, this shows that they are taking it seriously and that they're looking at this, that they recognize that it's an issue that they have to address and they have to root out. So, to me, if you don't hear anything about espionage, that's actually more worrying than seeing these cases and seeing these people brought to justice.
That was David Sachs, a security analyst at the Council on Foreign Relations. Coming up after the break, the international community calls for calm as India and Pakistan continue to exchange fire. Stay tuned.
Thank you for sharing our passion for food and Taiwan. Veggie Island explores the vibrant world of plant-based cuisine.
Wow, this is amazing.
While Taiwan on the Rocks uncovers the stories and craftsmanship behind every sip.
Have you ever tried Taiwanese beer?
Are you ready to taste even more of Taiwan?
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world,
TaiwanPlus News,
charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Tensions remain high between India and Pakistan as the two sides continue to trade fire over the long-disputed Kashmir region. India hit what it called terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan on Wednesday, 2 weeks after it accused Pakistan of involvement in an attack on Indian-administered Kashmir. World leaders are calling for calm, but fears are growing that the conflict may escalate. Reese Ayers reports.
Pakistanis rally in the streets of Islamabad to show support for their military, recently engaged in deadly cross-border exchanges with neighbouring India, an escalating conflict that has the world on edge. It's the latest saga in the two countries' decades-long spat over the Kashmir region, with Pakistan saying they've already responded to Indian airstrikes that killed dozens by downing enemy fighter jets.
India is a cowardly enemy that believes it is powerful by targeting innocent people. But last night, we showed that, by the grace and mercy of God Almighty, Pakistan knows how to deliver a fitting response in its defense.
India hasn't confirmed the loss of jets, but says its responses so far have been targeted and muted, striking sites linked to terrorist groups and warning Pakistan not to take things further.
India has demonstrated considerable restraint in its response. However, it must be said that the Indian armed forces are fully prepared to respond to Pakistani misadventures, if any, that will escalate the situation.
Both sides are claiming civilian casualties, adding to the thousands that have died in the region over the years. The intensifying conflict between the two nuclear-armed nations is prompting calls for de-escalation around the globe.
Peace, peace, peace. No war, no war, no war.
In London, Pakistani protesters gather outside India's High Commission to rally for peace.
We don't want war because at the moment so many countries involved in a war, and we like peace in this situation.
We've just been through with Palestine. Now this is happening in India and Pakistan, and it's not the loss of one country, it's loss from the both countries. And it's all the civilian and innocent people always dies between the wars.
In the United States, President Donald Trump, too, urged restraint.
We get along with both countries very well, good relationships with both, and I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
But with both sides claiming a right to respond after each subsequent attack, there are fears that an early off-ramp for India or Pakistan is quickly slipping away. Howard Jung and Reese Ayres for TaiwanPlus.
North Korea has fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles into the sea, according to South Korea. The projectiles were launched from North Korea's east coast and landed in the Sea of Japan. Seoul says it may be tests of weapons the North is looking to export and says it's working with Japan and the U.S. to look into the launch. The Philippine Navy has reported what it calls aggressive and unsafe movements by two Chinese Navy vessels earlier this week in the South China Sea. The encounter happened on May 5th as a Philippine vessel was conducting patrols in the Scarborough Shoal, an area claimed by both China and the Philippines. The Philippine ship issued radio warnings after the Chinese vessels started to tail it. China says the Philippine ship was, quote, attempting to invade the area and that its forces had expelled the Philippine ship. Manila says this kind of behavior raises tensions and threatens regional stability. Like Taiwan, Vietnam is a country at risk from typhoons. Last year, it was hit by Super Typhoon Yagi, and the impact is still felt by many Vietnamese who are struggling to move on 6 months after the disaster. Miriam Brunner has the story.
Half a year since her life was turned upside down, Nguyen Thi Kim is back in the place she once called home. This is all that remains of her village in the mountains of northern Vietnam, destroyed by floods from the most powerful typhoon to hit the country in decades. Her family had farmed this area for half a century, and she never thought she would have to leave.
My life was so peaceful. Time just passed by every day. I used to wish it would be like that forever. No one expected the disaster to be too big for us all. I can't forget.
Super Typhoon Yagi swept across Vietnam in September last year, killing at least 250 people and devastating the country's infrastructure. Nguyen Thi Kim's village was among the most affected. When the storm had passed, the area was deemed unsafe. Residents were advised to rebuild elsewhere and offered an alternative site. Though Kim and her neighbors have re-established their community, there's still a lot that worries them.
It's really safe now, but I am still very panicky whenever the wind and the rain come. I am very, very panicky.
A fear that experts say is not unfounded.
Predicting absolute safety in geology is actually very difficult because the Earth is changing slowly. Natural geological phenomena are also changing.
The villagers want their lives to return to normal, but climate change continues to pose a challenge. With more frequent rains across the region and the remaining threat of floods.
We want to follow our traditions, but if it's not safe to do so any longer, we need to change.
Displaced and still distraught, Nguyen Thi Kim and her neighbours are just several of millions of people here having to live with the impact of global warming, wanting to rebuild, but anxious that without a permanent solution, what lies ahead could again be gone in a flash. John Su and Miriam Brunner for TaiwanPlus.
Sailors from Palau and Taiwan have completed a historic trip in a traditional double-hulled voyaging canoe. The Alingano Maisu took 2 weeks to travel from Palau using only traditional navigation methods such as the stars, waves, and the winds. It's the first voyage of its kind and is aimed at reviving an ancient connection between Taiwan's indigenous peoples and Pacific Islanders. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Be sure to visit the TaiwanPlus website and follow our social media. Before we go, take a look at this ancient ceremony held once every 20 years that marks the beginning of the relocation and rebuilding of one of Japan's most revered Shinto shrines. I'm Joyce. Have a good evening.